let's see, I'm Tatyana. I'm a director of quality at the company called Iodine. It's a healthcare AI company. It's been there for around 14 years, but it's still private and small. So I've been there for a year. My background is I was an SDET for 11 years at Microsoft, starting 2001. I worked at the Microsoft GE healthcare startup. It was called CareDime. It died off after 5 years. I worked at companies like Disney, Pokemon. I'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation. I worked at VMware, really enjoyed that until it got bought by Broadcom, and then it kind of went downhill. Let's see, and right now I'm back in healthcare. So that's my background. And let's start. Let me actually share the slides.
Something is happening.
Okay, there we go. Slideshow. Okay, can you guys see the slides online?
Yeah, they're perfectly fine.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so let's start. So what I want to start with is talking about is scaling your organization the same for any organization? And the answer is no. So these are the three parameters, the way I saw them in my experience, that matter when you start scaling your QA organization and making sure that they're not overburdened, we still have confidence in our builds, and the company meets their business goals, right? So these are the three things. One is what are we starting with? What is the dev QA ratio that we started with? Second one is the cost of a mistake. What happens if we make a mistake and we ship a bug to production? So what is the consequences of that? And the third one is how fast should we go? How fast does our business needs us to go? And I'll explain this a little bit more in this slide with the example of the companies where I worked, and I'll try to explain you how they were all different situations that I kind of had to understand and then decide what am I doing in each one. So let's talk about the cost of the mistake. So let's take VMware, for example. So VMware created software that companies could use to run their software, right? So for example, one of the customers was FedEx. So FedEx would use this in their stores to run their applications. So if we mess something up, then the FedEx might go offline, their store start losing sales, it can close or whatnot, right? So the cost of the mistake was very high. We could not allow ourselves to ship any close to serious bug to production. And that was still happening, by the way, at VMware, but that was the kind of bar that we had to abide by. So let's take Disney, for example. At Disney, I was working on the messenger application. So the application would send the messages to all of the guests in the parks that like, hey, something is happening, or it would send an email notifications to people saying like, oh, here's the news and stuff like that. So there, if we make a mistake, someone might not get a message. Someone might get a message late, right? So the cost of the mistake is like, yeah, it's not going to be, good for customers, but no one's going to die or lose money or whatnot. So I put the cost of a mistake there at a medium. So let's take Pokemon. So at Pokemon, I work on the website for basically fans. So the fans, they have a community of fans, and they log into the website and they share, stories with each other or whatnot, right? So if we mess something up and that even that website goes down, nothing really happens. The fans might complain a little bit here or there, but like their reputation is not going to be lost. Again, so the pace kind of and the scale is of that organization is very different. So the company I'm at right now, Iodine, the cost of the mistake is also medium. So we do software for nurses, the nurses who review the documentation for customers and submit it to the insurance companies, right? So if something goes down or if something is broken, they're not going to be happy. They'll kind of like come back to us and start complaining. But it doesn't mean that, like, like in case of VMware, 1,000 servers goes down and then like 1,000 stores now don't have any, access. So I put that kind of cost of a mistake to medium. So why the cost of a mistake matters? Depending on the cost of the mistake, your confidence in your build has to be different, right? Like in case of VMware, you better be sure before you release that nothing is broken, right? In case of Pokemon, they're like, okay, we're confident, but it's okay if we break something. So different situations. So how fast should we go? That's another parameter. So in case of Disney and my company right now, the customers don't really care that you release new features, you release any updates. They're like, okay, something new happened, but we don't really care, right? Because of what the software is doing. In case of VMware, I was working on Tanzu, which was the new product. The customers wanted new features every day. They were like, okay, give it to us, give it to us, give it to us, right? So it was very important to go fast and ship and release features fast. In case of Pokemon, you already got it, right? So like fans are not going to be super excited about the website update. So I put the ratio of the dev and QA here. So that's kind of like where I've started with. But as you can see, at VMware, we were super efficient releasing every day with the 8 testers for 60 developers. Out of all of these companies that I worked at, the VMware was the most efficient delivery and highest quality that we delivered, right? At Disney, you see the ratio is higher, but we didn't release as fast. Our quality was not as high. So it all kind of like depends. So let's move on. So these are some of the quality transformation strategies that I applied in the companies that I worked at. So first thing, of course, when I come in, I would evaluate the current processes and scope. You have to understand what do we have? Does it work? It doesn't work. And this is something that I'll go a little bit in depth about. Second thing I would do is analyze the escape defects and customer issues. Understand what are the current problems, right? Like what are the kind of defects that we're leaking? What are the customers complaining about? So we can build the picture of what are we trying to improve. Next one is define success metrics. So going back to kind of like 3 basics, right? Like, so what are we after? Do we want to release faster? Do we want to have more confidence in our builds? Do we want to have less defects? And in different situations, it's a different success metric. In some companies, they say, hey, we want to release every day. That's our goal. In other companies, or like my company right now, they don't want to release more often, but they want to increase the confidence in their builds. The other strategy is basically automatic. So we talked about if we have a lot of manual tests, if there are gaps in coverage, we have to analyze and improve the coverage, increase the automation percentage, and move towards CI/CD. So CI/CD allows us to turn around the code quickly, which allows for smaller changes. We can react to it quickly if something broke. So that adds up to the efficiency and the confidence of the builds. So something else. So I'm going to go through these kind of like fairly quickly. And I could actually do a presentation on each one of these separately, but we don't have time for that. So I'll go through this high level, and then I'll focus on a few of these today. Let's see. So quality mindset and customer obsession. So this is something that I'm seeing a lot that is lacking in the organization where the quality suffers. So having the customer in mind whenever you develop a feature is something that doesn't come naturally or intuitively to a lot of people. So this is something that I had to build in many of these organizations and explain to folks, like, why does that matter, right? And quality mindset. So quality mindset, it's talk about how when you're writing the code, it's not just about writing the code, it's about thinking, deeper and thinking about it from the quality and customer perspective. So shift left, this is, I would say, is probably the most the important kind of strategy that I applied in few of these organizations to make QA life easier or QE lives easier, right? So, because a lot of times what happens is we, the QE develops functional tests, develops end-to-end tests, develops performance tests, and then they're kind of running short on time to do anything broader and focus on customer or focus on the broader integration scenarios. So shifting left and asking developers to own some of this testing is what helped me a lot in making quality team more efficient and kind of bringing higher confidence to our products, to our deployments. So again, I can talk for like 40 minutes around about shift left, right? But I'm not going to go into details around it right now. So innovation, sometimes I come into an organization and it's easy to apply some tool for either test automation or CI/CD that will give us the benefit right away, right? So think about it. So one of the tools that I've used in this company is called Apply Tools. You guys might have heard about it. This is the new visual validation tool that uses AI. So this is an example of kind of like bringing a tool can speed up your test automation efforts, can help you find more bugs early on in the cycle, and so on. So shift right. I know I have shift left and shift right here, but I think both of those are important. So having the right monitoring, having the deployment validation, and focusing on the kind of like quality after it's released to production is also a very effective method. So moving to the cloud, helps us scale the applications easier. That's what we've done in my company right now. That kind of, helped us with all of the performance issues that we've been facing. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is kind of balancing agility with quality, right? And so for some companies, agility is more important, for some less important. But at the end of the day, to scale their quality organization is to find the balance between these two. So let me pause for a second since I've been talking for a while. Any questions so far?
I have a question about the previous slide.
Okay, this one?
Yeah. So you are kind of basically calling out these three factors, right? So, they have their own place. They play a role, right? How do they interact with each other? So what is the dev QA ratio if you want to ensure that there are not a lot of mistakes? So which means that you can do more testing through more bodies at it, and especially how far should we go? We want to test more in a short amount of time. So have more QA. Right? So where do you find a balance?
Yeah. So it's interesting that sometimes if you want to go, so there are companies who wanted to go fast and they added QA, and some companies who wanted to go fast, they removed QA. So look at the Amazon, right? They're like, we want to go fast. So we don't want to spend, QA doing all of this work. Our devs are going to do the testing and we're going to go to production, right? So I would say there is no direct correlation, and it's a good question. I need to think about it more to kind of give you if there is a correlation between this. So the dev QA ratio is a very good topic. What's the ideal dev QA ratio? I will tell you that from my perspective, if we're doing shift left, right? So VMware was my kind of ideal state. We released every day. Our quality was high. And our ratio was basically, my team was 8 to 60 developers, right? And we did just perfectly fine, right? So I think that if you set up the right processes, then this could be a golden ratio. But I also know a lot of people who's going to tell you, oh, that's way too small. And it all depends on the processes that you're trying to implement.
Also the product that you're trying
and the product, right? So again, at Pokemon, they had 46 testers, and I'm like, I don't know what you guys are doing. You're not even shipping anything.
You mentioned testers. Is it dev to QA? So is it 46 dev? And
She means they are.
Thank you for catching a mistake on my side.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
She's a bug finder.
Okay.
I wanna,
So typically, the
But
number of developers. is
Shouldn't
smaller.
it be like one developer and 5 testers?
Well, I wanted
she didn't
to-
give,
The
I wanted to give you the size of the team, so not just the ratio,
Yeah.
right? Because the size of the team also matters. So that's why I didn't do the calculations.
I mean, it lacks context, how big the whole engineering team is as well, and how big the product and whatnot.
Yeah. No, I get the numbers right now. I have to look at QA to dev ratio. I
Yeah.
got the point. But in an ideal scenario, should you not be having more testers per developer?
Okay, I really then need to interject with my comment here on this, because we cannot keep thinking about testers, developers. We need to think about engineers. We need to think about quality ownership where. When we talk about QA to dev 8 to 60, clearly everybody on those 60 and the 8 owns pieces of quality.
Yes.
Clearly, otherwise there's no way in hell 8 we're gonna pull it out,
Yeah.
right? So it's not about tester, we have to remove ourselves from this notion of, should we add more testers? No, we should add more validation, we should add more upfront quality thinking.
Yeah.
All that stuff, which is all part of the same math. So if you change any one of those, it affects the formula anyway.
Yeah,
So it's not just testers, it's not the act of testing.
Yeah.
Like somebody was talking to me about, I said, I want to diminish the act of testing
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
full-time realm of all of my QA organization, QE organization.
so I agree with Naji, right? And so to me, quality is everyone's responsibility. That's the only way you can scale it. If you don't use that motto, you cannot scale a QA organization. You're gonna end up with a big QA team and no quality. That's what's gonna happen
That's it. yeah.
if you don't use the mindset of everyone. Exactly. All right, guys, I have a few slides, so let's move on.
Let's do it.
So I actually wanted to, let's see, briefly cover what is the analysis of the test processes and coverages. Oh my goodness, my numbers all got screwed up here. But this is actually 13 items that I have in here.
Oh, they were supposed to continue
Yes.
the numbers, so we'll just pretend that the middle
And that they all,
list is after the left list
Yes.
and the right list after.
yes,
One last follow-up
Yeah.
question about the tester QA ratio.
yeah.
Is it a budget constraint, which is the reason why you're squeezing the numbers down? Or if you had unlimited budget, would you have?
See, I don't think the unlimited budget is gonna guarantee you a big QA team and good quality. Again, so 20 years ago, quality teams owned quality and they were considered the gatekeepers of quality. So that was the waterfall days. After the agile got introduced, that life is gone. Like in the agile world, you cannot increase QA and get more quality and ship release faster. So forget about, like I actually advocate for smaller QA teams. And when I say that, sometimes QA teams were saying, what do you mean? You want to let us go because you want to create a small QA team? But look, like for me, I want to be valuable to business. And to be valuable to business, we need to deliver sometimes fast and efficiently. And deliver efficiently doesn't mean a big QA team. Like that's just the, real, modern life of QA. Like I don't want a bigger QA team because that doesn't guarantee us that we can go as fast and still with the quality. That's a good topic on kind of the ratio and the size of the QA. We can have a whole different separate conversation about that. But I'm actually running out of time right now. Let me see if I can go through this in 4 minutes and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions. Thank you for all of the questions, guys, by the way. So, okay, I'm not gonna read through that slide, but I just wanna call out how many aspects of the quality processes are out there, right? So we're not just looking at, okay, number of tests, number of failed tests. We're looking at a lot of kind of agile methodologies. How often do we release? What is the release process? How does QA fit into the release process? Is there deployment validation? Is there tag debt? What's code coverage? So I find these kind of like a pretty comprehensive list of the processes that I usually evaluate in the new company. So if you guys can think of something else, please let me know and I'll add it to this list. And please type it in chat online if you have it. So I'm gonna skip through this and I wanna kind of give you an example, basically what I've done in 1 year in my current company. So this is what kind of challenges I identified when I joined the company and I did that analysis that I just showed you, right? So there was no QA leadership, no planning for QA team work. So this is one of the biggest problems I see. They basically think that like, hey, we're just gonna assume that QA is gonna take care of all of the testing and validation and automation, and we're not gonna count how many story points that's gonna take. And what happens is QA, of course, does their job and they validate stuff, but they accumulate tech debt. So, and there's a lot of manual tests and they're missing coverage and blah, 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 right? So this was the big problem here. So I had to say like, okay, we're gonna count actually the story points QA spend on validation, on automation, and whatever is that what all we're doing. So the automated test percentage was 40%, right? That's very low. And so imagine how can we go fast if we wanna go fast with that much? I'll give you the worst example. Their test path took one whole sprint, which was 2 weeks, and 5 people. So right now, after a year of me working there, it's 2 days with 2 people. So we got it there in a year without additional resources. I didn't ask for extra people. I just had to start counting the time. So I'll tell you that in the next slide, what I did to get there. All right, lack of realistic test data. So our QA environments don't have the realistic test data. It's some old sample data from a long time ago. So we're not finding a lot of bugs. Their lack of end-to-end and performance testing. So 4 out of 5 products didn't have any performance tests, automated performance tests, right? And there was no cross-product end-to-end test, neither manual or automated. So basically, it should just work for customers, the integrations, right? There were test coverage gaps and lack of automated deployment validations. Like you wouldn't believe it, but they would deploy to production at night because that's when the customers are not online because they don't want to disrupt their day. And then no one would check it because they're all sleeping. And then they would come in the morning and they would be like, oh, something is broken. Well, there is a pager duty for their defense that would wake them up online. But if the alerts are not set up in a proper way, then no one's going to waking up at line and they come to a broken product in the morning. So, so what I've done is, so this is a maturity level that I kind of defined for them. And so you see here, there are six
Dimension.
yeah, dimensions. So one is like manual tests, like how many manual tests we have. So this is maturity, right? So a lot of manual tests is low maturity, few manual tests is high maturity. Test coverage gaps, performance testing, test data, product validation, deployment validation, and cross-product end-to-end tests. So I put the maturity level for each one of these when I started, right? And then every quarter we evaluate it. So how are we doing? So this is what I've done in this year, right? So we started planning QA work the same way as the dev work I just can explain, right? So I've asked the teams to allocate 50% of QA time for tech debt, right? Not just like, oh, we'll get there when we get there, when we find time, right? We will never find time.
Yeah.
So allocate 50% for tech debt. This is how we increased the automated percentage from 40% to 90% on average in 1 year without additional resources. So introduce shift left. So what did shift left give us? That decreased the number of end-to-end tests that we have to develop. If we have more component tests, API tests down the stack, we have to create less end-to-end tests, which makes our life easier, but it also makes the deployment, the release more efficient, right? The release process more efficient. So there was a lot of educational sessions that we hold on quality mindset, shift left, API testing to kind of build that mindset in the dev population. Develop performance tests in the time that we've got, increased our automated percentage and address the test coverage gaps. So this is where we are basically right now after a year. So if you see our manual tests are all kind of green now. We have very few manual tests. Our test coverage gaps are almost gone. Our performance tests are done at least for 3 products. So now this was the first year, basically. The first year we focused on the first three columns. Now this year, 2025, we're focusing on the next three columns. If I could get, like budget for, 5 more people, I might have done it in 1 year, but my boss said, you got to do it with the people you got. So here we are. So that's it. That was the end. All right.
Good job, by the way.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes for questions. Do you guys have more questions?
I do have a question regarding the test coverage. Can you put a little insight that, especially for the functional test, how you were measuring the test coverage?
Yeah, so initially, when we did the analysis of our test coverage, we sat down with the devs and QA, and we said, okay, what do we think we're missing in our manual and automated tests? It was all kind of like, we didn't use the code coverage tools, like this is something I would like to have, the code coverage for the end-to-end and integration tests, but there are challenges with that, so we don't have that yet. So we basically sat down, we brainstormed it, we said like, hey, this is what we think we're missing. We put that on the roadmap, and then we, created work items and said, this is what we're gonna address.
So you measured, so the metric for code coverage was maybe coarse grain. It was
Yeah.
component level, like,
Yeah.
is any component not covered?
Yeah.
And
A
that was
scenario
one.
level.
No, like, that's one better than not doing that quantitatively. Anything quantitative is already better than not having a measure. I
Yeah.
salute you for that.
Yeah,
The-
yeah. Thanks for giving that insight. In our company, we do have a sonar queue and all that tool, but I just kind of realized the challenges with like those are not really just kind of giving the coverage, especially for the
Exactly,
the functional
exactly.
tests. Yeah,
Exactly.
Thank you.
So this model, is it like an industry standard or is it something that you developed?
This is my standard.
Wow.
So I've done
I
it.
think metrics for success is what Tatyana has done here. She's created success metrics for her own job, by the way, but her org's job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done this in multiple companies now and it worked well. And sometimes I would add 1 or 2 different things for a specific company, but it's pretty much like
Okay.
this.
So this kind of set up a good standard for the products that you're delivering. Okay, awesome.
All right. Any more
So
questions?
there was once upon a time, there was the CMM level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. If you heard about this capability maturity models.
Okay.
I think when we started life, when we were toddlers or something. So that model doesn't exist anymore to qualitatively analyze the company's software development process or maturity models. So is there something like that for testing? Like, hey, this product is like 5-star certified, this product is 4-star, based upon all these things. Do you have such a rating system for products
I don't think
from the
so.
testing point of view?
I don't think so. I think there are some standards like that exist.
There are some standards in the industries.
Yeah.
What are those standards called?
Healthcare, aviation.
Oh, okay.
They have some internals. They might rely on CMMI that you mentioned
Uh-huh.
for this, but usually.
So there are some agile maybe processes maturity matrix, like I've seen some of those, but not for quality.
Oh, okay.
And the ones that I've seen for quality, they're not very practical.
Okay.
So I'll tell you that people who use those things, they like the high tech. So I worked in the big tech, right? So the big tech doesn't use any of that.
Yes.
They're just kind of like, we're just going to do whatever happens.
Set up our own standards.
Exactly.
They think
Okay.
it doesn't apply to our scale.
Okay.
It wouldn't apply to their scale. They define their own rules, right?
Right.
So, but then in the non-big tech, I've seen some of it and some of them are kind of shared, but like I don't use them because I don't think it applies to the kind of most efficient models like Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, like.
But definitely in critical industries like healthcare or aviation or something, if you don't have like a quality metric, how do you even release that healthcare product? Like say like it's a healthcare product, and it has got to do with the lives of people. So if you don't have like some kind of a something to veracity or whatever you call that,
Yeah. So, I
how do you
mean,
even deliver it to patients or doctors?
I don't think there's any standards for healthcare software products. like there's of course like some, you can't release PHI, so there is some compliance stuff that you have to do, but there is no like, okay, quality has to be at this. Well, maybe there is, but like our company doesn't doesn't have that.
There are standard ISO and things.
Yeah, something like that.
That are product quality standards, not the engineering process quality or the velocity. This involves both engineering velocity, not just product quality, by the way, which is they're married together very well. That other ISO stuff, look, anything related to the government, it's bureaucracy that requires very cumbersome processes to do things that probably otherwise can be done more efficiently, but these are strict standards. That's what I can get from what you're saying. But in terms of how they arrive at a product to then be tested for ISO, that's up to the company.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Hey, question, when you say test data as a metric here or the quantitative measure or even semi-quantitative measure, are you talking about customer fidelity and richness? Or are you talking about like what size of test data? Because that's not necessarily also like, we can create lots of big files and then.
So it's kind of like a quality of test data. So like how representative it is
That's what I meant.
compared to
Fidelity.
customer data.
Right. So how do you measure that?
I mean, it's hard to
Objective.
measure it, right? But it's kind of,
I have a take on
Yeah.
that. They usually take the older data and anonymize it. There are some anonymization techniques.
Right.
Anonymize
Oh,
it
like
and then
production
use
data.
production data, but anonymize it without.
right. But
There are anonymization techniques to get to.
so in our case, for example, we have many customers, right? So like we can anonymize one customer, which we're doing right now, but we're not anonymizing all of them.
Yeah, they
So that
make
means
multiple
that
verticals, for example.
Some of them might have different data than others, right?
Yeah.
So it's not an easy problem, but like here, I'm doing it very high level, like low, medium, high,
Right.
right? So I'm not saying I'm going to give you a percentage, but like right now, the data is very simple and very basic, right? Like if we could anonymize like, 10 customers, that would put us at the high level maturity. But right now, we don't even have one customer anonymized.
And I guess you have some statistics. For
Yeah,
instance,
yeah.
in terms of feature, like who uses.
In telemetry, we have some of that, yeah.
What it also gives a good insights for the testing.
And also Amazon has this Turk, Amazon Turk,
Yeah.
they generate the data for you.
Yeah, there are tools which can generate the data for you. Yeah, so we don't have this kind of problem solved, right? So like, this is my goal for this year is to solve it and enable all of these products to test with a better quality data.
Hey, what about product validation? What do you mean by that?
So this is the deployment validation.
That's what I thought when you were talking about that being a problem.
Yep.
So why is everything like red? If our product validation end-to-end tests like that.
So we don't have automated or manual validation of the products when we deploy them.
So
Her company today is
Yeah.
low on that.
Yeah.
Maturity.
no post deployment
Yeah,
tests
exactly.
in terms of that.
Exactly.
In the levels that you wanted to.
In any level.
In any level. Nothing
Yeah.
can be done in production, right?
Nothing is being done
Nothing is being.
in production.
It's been done, so QA was allowed to do something in production and not QA.
So this is another problem that we have. We didn't have any full-time QA until recently, and our offshore is not allowed, don't have access to PHI. So the QA didn't even have
I
access to the
was
product.
in the same shoes. when I
Yeah,
was
so-
For
Yeah.
healthcare.
So now I have 3 people who have, PHI access, which is like, okay, at least they can manually validate this if they have to.
It was crazy. And even when I got this PHI, I have to remotely connect to some machine. It fits physically in the.
Yeah.
No data has leaked
Yeah,
outside.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I have one more question. You said if you like optimize, you focused creating, on doing, on managing, on dealing with technical debt. How did you do that in context of doing everyday tasks,
Yep.
sometimes the high priority activities? Because like the most anticipated answer to this is like, I'm busy today, I need to ship something, I need to test something, I need to deliver something,
Yeah.
etc., etc. you mentioned that you not
Yeah.
get any additional sources.
Yeah, no, so I basically made a big deal about it, number one. Second, I said we need 50% of all of the QE to work on the tech debt. And because we're doing the quarterly planning, I said, this is how we're gonna plan it. I'm gonna give you 50% time of my QE to do whatever release activities you wanna do. And if that's not enough, you have to deal with it yourself. Like the devs have to deal with it themselves, right? But I mean, it wasn't too extreme. Like I made sure that they're not gonna going completely crazy, but and then also I pushed for shift left because the more API testing they do, the less end-to-end testing we have to do. But
That's what I wanted to hear. So
yeah, and
40% to 90 doesn't mean that only QA team, the QA folks.
no, actually, this work was only done by QA team.
You do not count the API test in terms of.
No. I'm only in this 90%. I'm only counting end-to-end test. Yeah. So the API and functional API and dump unit test, like I don't count it in this number. I only count what QA team owns formally. But the other thing, like I'm very happy that the dev team are kind of like start taking more ownership as well. And they're kind of like even initiating, let us help you with end-to-end tests. So, and I'm very happy about that, right? Because the QA team has enough work.
And it's also a good practice of sharing the technical
quality mindset. Yeah.
Because developers usually have like more proficient in coding, so they can share some best practices. They can even invent and implement some internal tools that will speed up.
And Amazon does that, and Microsoft does it, so they can do it. Yep. All right. Anna, did you have a question? I'll take one question online.
Yeah. I have a question. Thank you for the great presentation. That was nice to hear those green arrows instead of red ones. Red is always like give some jobs in processes for sure. You was talking about the developers, that developers should take more initiative, and in your case, they took some initiative. And what about business? Was the business agreed with that relocation of resources? Because obviously, majority of developers, they were just developing this stuff, which eventually released on the production, and now they need to spend more time for stabilizing the things, doing the unit tests, API tests, whenever you want them to do, instead of developing the features, which might be crucial for business. How do you have those sort of points raised by the business or manager or product owner whenever you
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of pushback from PM because right now our company is very kind of focused on commercial initiatives. So when I say like, hey, I needed one developer to implement CI/CD in this team, they were like, no, we don't have that. So there's definitely kind of negotiation conversations that are happening. But I would say that this is the reason why I haven't done all 6 columns, because I kind of pulled back and I said, okay, I'll focus on these 3, and I can do that 3 with 50% that I've asked you, to give me. And with that speed, I could do it, right? But definitely, I didn't do everything I would want to do because of that, right? Because in every kind of quarterly planning, I would be like, I'll give you one example. So there was one team which didn't have any reasonable data in their QA environment. So they did manual testing in their UAT environment, right, which is a production environment. And I've been asking them like, hey, we need a resettable data so we can run our tests, and it took me 6 months, of asking for them to actually do it because it required some dev expertise. And that would have take priority over the commercial initiatives. So sometimes I had to be patient. So I don't always get what I want with the business and product. But sometimes you push, sometimes you negotiate, sometimes you wait, and then you get some green arrows.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so we are running a little bit late, but any last question I can take, if there is any? We're good? All right, thank you all for listening.